All right, so Thunderbolts asterisk, or, that asterisk is revealed to have a different meaning at the end of the movie, but we'll get to that. Let's start with your thoughts, Tyler. I know you've been very critical of the MCU as of late, well, as of the last few years, so I'm really curious to hear what you think about Thunderbolts.
Yeah, so I'm curious, if you go onto IMDb now, and on the official title, is it now changed from the Thunderbolts to the New Avengers?
I think they're still marketing it as Thunderbolts, but in a couple of years, this movie is just going to be called The New Avengers, I think.
It's a very weird decision.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
And it's bizarre to do the announcement whilst the film, I think the film had already come out and it was doing its rounds at the cinemas, and that's when they made the name change announcement.
So I guess you saw the name change before watching the actual movie, right?
Yeah. And I think I'd heard that was what the asterisk was going to be about anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there were theories, but I think the theories were more leaning towards like a Dark Avengers type scenario or something like that.
Yeah, I didn't think it'd be called The New Avengers, but I thought it was going to be, an Avengers spin-off. And Dark Avengers is probably a better name, but yeah, I suppose you can't. They're trying to market themselves as heroes, so you can't be called the Dark Avengers.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
Strange marketing. There was a lot of strange marketing around this film, and it feels like they didn't have a lot of confidence going in to how well this was going to do, which is why maybe they added that extra element to try and push the film. But just strange not to do, months of build-up to that new name for the film, rather than doing it already when it's at the cinema.
I think definitely this decision was born from desperation and trying to retool some of the stuff that they were doing that wasn't working in the past few years. But I do believe that from a marketing standpoint, it was smart to surprise everyone at the end, and then, in the first few days of release, remind everyone, hey, there's a new MCU movie coming out, and actually it's an Avengers movie, so let's go watch it all together, So people who went to see the movie in the cinema like me on the first few days of release weren't spoiled on the surprise, and people who were on the fence were like, oh, maybe I will check this out now that I know that has this Avengers connection. So, I don't know. I feel like it made sense. It paved the way for something that I am interested in seeing for the next few films. So, we'll see if it pays off.
Yeah, fair. So, I suppose initial thoughts, just general overview. Definitely above average when comparing it to the Marvel slop that has been coming out over the last few years.
And that's not saying much. It cleared the bar that was so low we couldn't even see it. So
it's quite a low bar. Some good stuff in here. Some scenes I enjoyed. Some questionable decisions. I would love to see somebody who's if my dad watched this film, because he's in tune with the MCU up to the main timeline that everybody knows, but probably hasn't really watched any of the Disney Plus stuff. Like someone who's in it to that degree must be so confused when they see all these characters coming on screen and they're like, these are your new Avengers. It's it's a weird crew of characters to pick for this kind of film. It's Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, basically. And it's weird because DC's always been playing catch up with what Marvel was trying to do, and now it seems the other way. Several years too late, Marvel are doing their version of the Suicide Squad bad villains turned good storyline, and that part of it was very generic, overplayed, but there was some decent stuff in here, and Florence Pugh's performance is good, and I really liked Lewis Pullman as Bob/Sentry.
Yep.
Easily the highlight of the film for me, and was a genuinely interesting and quite disturbed character that it's probably one of the better villains we've seen in an MCU movie for a long time.
And you know why is that, Tyler? Because this movie has a theme, and the villain is connected to that theme. It sounds like this should be the basis for all Marvel project and every project that comes out of. But not always this happens. Some of these movies say absolutely nothing and waste your time in the process, while this movie, tries to be about something. And
absolutely, and a great performance attached to it as well. This isn't MODOK in Ant-Man 3 screaming, "I'm a dick" or something like that. This is...
I am not a dick, I think. That was the actual quote.
He should could have said I am a dick. But...
and everyone involved in this production is a dick.
Yeah, definitely. It's levels above that, but obviously, it's a low bar. that is.
Yeah, it's sad to say, it's levels above what we expect from the MCU because of very basic storytelling that really works. I liked Yelena, I loved Red Guardian, I loved Bucky, I really, really liked Bob, and making the movie about something. And they could have gone a little bit more in depth with this depression angle.
They kind of speed run through that once they get to the real meat of the themes and the story, and then it's just sped past too quick. I enjoyed the first act or so of the film a lot more than the middle and the end, for sure.
Yeah, you have this metaphorical void inside Yelena that becomes a literal void that the heroes must defeat by understanding each other and showing love and affection. I thought it was fairly well done. It was inspired, it was decently portrayed. It could have been better, for sure. We've said many times, Marvel doesn't excel at depth, unfortunately. It was a bit half-baked. They didn't go all the way. But this is, I judge this based on the idea that this is supposed to be kind of like a family movie. Even though, there's darker elements than we're used to with Marvel. It's still...
Do you feel so? I feel like this is more of a... it's a 12A as well, so it's a higher age rating than most of their films. I feel like this is more of a adult.
It is, but how to describe this? Like when at the very end, Bob becomes the Void and it starts enveloping New York in darkness, right? That was a very cool sequence that we had in the trailers as well, with people turning into shadows, the shadows of the atomic bomb. I thought that was really well done. Up until a specific moment, I was really intrigued on what this Void was going to be. And then they have this scene where Red Guardian saves this little girl, and then the little girl is enveloped in darkness and disappears. And
I thought she was dead. I was like, oh my god, they just killed a little girl in a Marvel movie.
What I thought was, as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, they're not gonna kill a child, so this means that it's reversible. And that's when I understood, okay, they're gonna probably go inside the Void, which makes sense. It's thematically resonant, as I said. But that's where my surprise ended. And the movie has very few surprises, and you know exactly where it's going pretty early on. But that element of Void being so destructive, I thought was really interesting, until they baited us into thinking they were killing a kid, which is not gonna happen in a Marvel movie. And if it was a different movie, maybe I wouldn't have thought that, because you don't necessarily expect them to do certain things.
Yeah, no, so true. Because I think when you see that scene in the trailer, I was assuming those people were being killed.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the tension does go once you realise where they're going to take that. Just how overplayed is the trope of our hero talking the villain out of their state. Do you know what I mean?
The funny thing is that it just happened in the new Captain America movie, like 2 months ago.
I know, it happens so much. And Ant-Man, well, what other film I'm thinking of does this?
Well, Captain America, you have Steve Rogers, who kind of brings Bucky back to the light.
Oh, that's it. Multiverse of Madness does the exact same thing as well. America Chavez talks Scarlet Witch out of her evil acts.
But we still do have an action sequence of sorts.
You still get an action sequence, but they've set up, in all of those stories, you've set up this villain who's undefeatable to a degree. And it's okay, well, how, the only way to defeat them is the power of friendship or the power of love or something a bit silly. And I think it actually works better here.
Well, here it makes total sense. They cannot defeat the Void as is.
Yeah. And similar in Doctor Strange too. Scarlet Witch seems to be all powerful in that moment, and she cannot be defeated unless it's through the power of talking. and at least in this one, I knew that was going to be where they went with it, especially when you start seeing this connection between Yelena and Bob at the beginning. She's trying to help him through because she can tell he's very disturbed. At least they have a good connection at the beginning, so it makes a bit more sense that she's the one who can talk him out of it. But I just think that's such an overplayed trope. It's more interesting to see what they did in Suicide Squad, the second one, the James Gunn one.
Yeah. when they have to kill Starro.
Yeah, and we see them using their powers together to take down something rather than just one character does talking.
Well, I mean, yes, I understand what you're saying, but I kind of liked the concept of these dream sequences where the characters, see their lowest moments and they understand, what they need to do to be better. And that's kind of the theme and that's what they're going for. I wish we could have seen more. And most importantly, some of the characters are not as well developed as Elena, unfortunately. It falls a bit flat when you don't really see much about Ghost or Walker.
Ghost is an Avenger now.
Yeah. Who's that? Who?
The villain from Ant-Man 2.
Oh, I barely remember that. I like the concept of them kind of like, because you have the big fight before when they are in the Avengers Tower and Sentry has the silly costume. And that sequence was really fun. It was a showcase of the powers.
It was great.
We understand how powerful he is. It's very well done. Stunt choreography. It was really engaging. And you're like, okay, so they're not going to be able to stand against him physically. Even more so when he becomes the Void, because then it's just, it's just going to envelop them in darkness. So I think it was smart, because you talked about Suicide Squad, the second one, but I am thinking about Suicide Squad, the first one, which is an awful movie. And one of the reasons why it's awful is because you have this ragtag team of just murderers, like a sniper, a weird guy with a skin condition, and a crazy lady with a bat or a hammer, I don't even remember. And they have to take down this goddess.
Oh, completely inappropriate villain for the heroes in that scenario.
Exactly. And I was afraid that they were going to have a similar situation here because as they even state in the trailer and then in the movie, they're just people who shoot. Yeah, Bucky and Red Guardian and Walker have the super serum, but they're just very strong guys. They don't have like lasers or like Scarlet Witch powers. They do not have...
They're very strong guys until they don't need to be strong guys.
Exactly.
Beaten up by a normal human being, which I've always found annoying.
Yeah, it is annoying. But I like that they found an interesting way to have a cool villain, a real threat, and then find a way to weave the theme into how they defeat him. I just wish that the direction and the cinematography and, like the technical aspect during these scenarios, during these scenes, if within the Void would be a little more inspired.
Yeah, it was very basic. It felt a bit low budget in general.
Yeah.
There's really only the two sequences. And I mean, even this sequence didn't look amazing, but when Sentry first becomes Sentry and he fights off all the Thunderbolts, that was kind of cool. And then there's a scene when Bucky takes down this Jeep.
Yeah, those are the two big action set pieces. And the escape from the compound as well, I guess, was a big sequence.
It feels more like an extended Disney Plus thing rather than like a premiere movie. Like, it feels low budget in comparison to like what we see as the difference between the films and the Disney Plus shows.
Doctor Strange 2, with all of its problems, in this regards, I think was way more inventive with the framing of things and the action sequences. There's a point where Doctor Strange like uses musical notes as like explosive weapons. So, there was a way more inventiveness in the action sequences and the way certain moments were shot and framed. Here, it's a bit basic, as you said. It falls a bit flat. And I wish, especially because they have like great talent, I think some of the people who worked on Everything Everywhere All at Once worked on this.
Okay.
So, that was a very cool movie from like just the look of it.
Yeah.
And like it was very inventive. So, I guess, once again, the MCU tries to get creatives that they can control, but they don't leave them enough space to express.
Yeah. I think you're touching on the difference between some of those action scenes in something like Doctor Strange 2 and here. When you look at the Suicide Squad, more so the second one, because the first one's not very good. You have a group of characters who are very different from each other in terms of abilities. Like, we have a lot of different superpowers going on, which creates interesting scenes and creates conflict and creates cool action moments. Whereas these guys, we have a Black Widow light, we have 3 offshoots of Captain America, and they're all very similar. They're just mercenary hand-to-hand combat types. I think if you had another couple characters in here instead of, Ghost is the only one with a slightly unique power set, but she's so unfocused on in this film. I think if you had a couple couple of characters with some more interesting power sets, this could have been a lot better. The inclusion of Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad, which was great, because it not only allows for these interesting action sequences when he's taking out people with polka dots and using his powers in an interesting way, but we get that scene where he's throwing up all the polka dots in the woods and his body's like all filling up with all these lights.
Yeah, there's some body horror going on.
It's
Yeah,
interesting. It like makes the power set and things like that feel more real, whereas these guys, they're just basically hand-to-hand combat soldiers, and they're all the same.
Yeah, the team in the second Suicide Squad knocks this one out of the water. You have a shark guy. They're all very different and they're all very interesting in their own right. And even when there's similarity, like with the Idris Elba character and John Cena as Peacemaker.
They played on that perfectly.
They play on the fact that they are similar and they have this challenge. Like at some point they have to kill a bunch of guys.
Oh yeah, it's one of the better sequences in the film. It's great.
And yeah, if you compare Thunderbolts to the second Suicide Squad, Thunderbolts loses by a mile. But compared to what we've seen so far in the last few years from the MCU, I think this is a step in the right direction. I think the chemistry and the dynamic between the characters work for the most part. And even if there's similarity between, as you said, 3 of these characters are basically just super soldiers. There's one with unique powers, but she doesn't do much.
Yeah.
And the other one is a Black Widow, which is just a female super soldier, basically. So
but, I mean, she doesn't have any abilities though. She's just a highly trained assassin.
Yeah.
They don't have any super serum or anything. But they actually have an opportunity to do a similar kind of joking scene where the Peacemaker and Bloodsport have when they all meet each other in the where they find Bob. And they've all been sent to sort of kill each other. Walker pops in and Ghost calls him a dime store Captain America.
Yeah.
What he should have done is been like, look around. We're all dime store characters. You're dime store Black Widow. You're dime store this person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it would have been funnier if he acknowledged that, whereas it was like, oh no, yeah, I am a loser.
I am the only loser here.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, don't worry, Walker. You're probably one of the more interesting characters that's there.
But they play on this. I think one of the elements that work the best from this movie is how self-aware it is, but not to a point of parody. It's just like, I'm thinking about the first scene we see of Yelena fighting her way through this hallway, and it's like this very cool overhead shot. It reminded me of better movies, I guess.
So true.
But I've never seen an action sequence like this in an MCU movie framed quite like this. The fact that she's bored out of her mind killing these people and doing this job, and she's depressed and she's not feeling it anymore. And it's like, hey, you feel the same, right? You are kind of done. Like, you don't want to watch these characters anymore. But wait, we are gonna show you that maybe there's still some value to be found in these movies.
Did you think that was a little meta sequence at the beginning?
I thought so. I felt like it was very intentional to frame this around depression and fatigue and kind of like have this character find her purpose by joining this new team. And then, at the end, you're like, okay, so she's found some new purpose. And even the MCU has a new energy now because of these characters and how prevalent they became. Even if at the beginning, and maybe for some people at the end of the film too, they're still nobodies. They're just characters that we don't really care about. I do care about Yelena now. I do care about Red Guardian. I care about Bucky. And I think, I want to see where their story goes next. So I think the movie was successful in this sense.
Yeah, I think Florence Pugh elevates the character.
Oh my god, yes.
Because I think if it was a lesser actress, I don't think the character would be anywhere near as interesting. Because I feel like that's the whole, I'm a super skilled assassin, but I'm lazy and I don't care, and I'm just going around and killing people, blasé. I feel like that's a bit overplayed as well. So it's nothing unique that we're seeing from her character, but she elevates it with her performance. I feel like
it's not unique, but still. It's something to latch on to and to develop.
It was very much like the boys kind of feeling with subverting the tropes of what it means to be a hero.
Exactly.
These are people, like, heroism is sort of fallen upon their lap rather than them seeking it out or them doing genuinely good deeds. It kind of the situation just happens upon them in a way. But yeah, she definitely elevates it, I think. She's got some really good scenes in this, like I noted down. I think a lot of the conversations she has with David Harbour are quite good, and that's kind of where they're trying to put a bit of the soul into the film. It's just funny because like if you haven't seen Black Widow, they're like, you know, you're my father, I haven't seen me for ages. It's like,
what happened? What's going on?
It's like, what is going on with these characters? I feel like massive missed opportunity to kind of focus on Bucky as well. I think Bucky takes too much of a backseat.
Poor
here.
Bucky.
Why is he a congressman? What do they?
Well, it's not anymore. You know, it's not good at being a congressman. They just like, this is some of the most frustrating stuff in the MCU where
does he become a congressman in the last Captain America film?
So in Captain America Brave New World, you have the one good scene, even though they ruin it with a fucking MCU joke at the end, is the scene where Sam Wilson is at his lowest point for reasons I won't go into because I don't want you to fall asleep. And Bucky comes to visit him and they have this heart-to-heart, this conversation where he is like, oh, you need to be better because you are Captain America. And he is, in that moment, running for Congress or something like that, or is in Congress. So like people are like, oh my God, what's happening? And you hear mention of this here and there throughout the film. But that's just one scene that we have with Bucky in Brave New World. So here, I'm expecting him to be a congressman, and that is going to be a storyline. But then they're like, oh, we're already bored with this. I guess someone else introduced this element in the story. We don't need it. So we're just going to have him in a couple scenes, but then he goes back to being Bucky because that's what we care about. And I'm like, okay, but like, why did you introduce him being a congressman if it wasn't going to have anything to do with anything? And they've done this over and over again in the MCU. They introduce stuff and then they just hand wave it away in the next movie with a sentence or two.
Yeah, they give the project to another writing team or creative team and they're like, no, I scrap that direction, let's take it in my direction. There's such a lack of continuity here and it felt so pointless. It felt like they didn't know what to do with Bucky, or it was like, felt like one of those situations you have in like Daredevil Born Again where actually he had a minor role initially and then they're like, actually no, he's probably the biggest asset of the team, or like in terms of well-known faces in the movie, and then they've tried to insert him in later on. It just felt weird, and it felt like he didn't really come into the movie until he's on that motorbike and he takes out the car and takes them out. And it was a great introduction, and it shows you that he is the coolest, most interesting member of the team, so perhaps he should have been more of a focal point in this film.
Because he has a lot of history, you know, we've seen him in a lot of movies, and so we're naturally more attached to him. Yeah. But I think it was a right decision to leave space for these newer characters, let them lead, and he was going to be kind of like the candy, the cherry on top. Oh, we're going to see Bucky again, so I'm probably going to watch this at some point.
Yeah, I like that he's the one who gives them, you know, they have the sort of rallying speech, and he's the one who sort of tells them, because if there's anybody out of them who knows what it is to be redeemed, it's him. You know, he was like the world's worst assassin for however many years, and now he's become an Avenger. So yeah, redemption is...
Yeah, and again, you know, that's thematic depth. I'm willing to say there's some depth in this movie, even if it's very well hidden. The idea of all these characters being not so great, but actually maybe we can be great. I don't know. I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, it's not amazing. We said why, but yeah, I have a few notes on stuff that I want to go over, but I wanted to, you already kind of like briefly mentioned your opinion on this, but I wanted to ask you about the new Avengers twist as it is in the movie. What did you think of it? What are your thoughts on this new development?
Made me laugh.
All right.
At the end of the film, I
think that was the point.
Probably not in the way that they wanted to, because especially the way like they announce it at the end and the way the camera tracks in on Yelena's face and she finally cracks a smile and she's like, I am an Avenger now. I don't think it's supposed to be comedic. I think it's supposed to be genuine, that bit at the end. And what I don't really get, the silver-haired woman, Fontaine.
Yeah. Valentina.
Valentina, she's been in some other things, hasn't she?
Seinfeld.
As in, not the actress, Julia Dreyfus, but she was in...
She's in
MCU.
Seinfeld. Okay, so she was... I know this. She was introduced, I think, for the very first time at the end of Black Widow.
Yes, okay. I thought I recognized her.
Yeah, she... Basically, the post-credit scene of Black Widow is Yelena visiting Scarlett Johansson's grave, her sister. And while she's there, Valentina arrives and she has different hair. She has like blue or, I don't know, purple hair. And she's like, oh, have I ever told you about the Avengers initiative? Oh, wait, no, I'm not Nick Fury, but I'm kind of Nick Fury, but evil.
So cringe.
Yeah, basically she sends her after Hawkeye, which is a teaser for the Hawkeye TV show, where Yelena shows up and she has been tasked to kill Clint Barton because Valentina told her that Clint Barton was responsible for her sister's death. And then she doesn't, because of course she doesn't. She becomes an ally, and there's a cute scene between her and Kate Bishop, which is the new Hawkeye girl person. So that's kind of like the involvement at first. We see her again, I think it's in Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV show, where she recruits Walker, Captain America Light, that we see in this movie. And then I think she was in the second Black Panther too, because she had some sort of relationship with the Martin Freeman character.
Right, okay. Okay, so yeah, she has been in a few other things. I wasn't sure, because the first scene you see her in this, she's at the testimonial and they're explaining to the court about, she's been involved in a secret program to try and recreate superhumans around the world, a secret program. But she's not a government figure. Is she like a head of a corporation or something?
Yeah, I think she was FBI or CIA, and then she became the head of this separate entity within the government, kind of like dealing with secretive stuff in the vault that they have to burn at the beginning of the movie, where they send all the agents, where they send Yelena. You can see, all this secret stuff that the government is probably trying to hide or destroy. So she was an operative leading these operations overseas, and like secret stuff that maybe not even the CIA or FBI were involved with. So yeah, she's just like a Nick Fury type character.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense, because it seems like the grip of like government power is strengthening around her, and the walls are closing in on her. So I didn't necessarily get the sense that she's above the law in what she's doing.
Yeah.
So I thought it was,
there were gonna be consequences for making mistakes, I guess.
Yeah, but then somebody falls out of the sky. It's a big news story, and she just takes over Avengers Tower and continues her experiments, and then there's no repercussions for what's happened. I thought that story didn't really go anywhere. I just found her involvement in most of the film, I don't know, she's not very charismatic. No. I didn't think her performance was very good.
I agree. They even give you a little, just a tiny little thing when he touches Bob / Sentry, and we see 5 seconds of her past, and I guess when she was a poor little girl in Italy, of course there's mafia around, like killing her father and stuff like that. So it's like,
well, that's so superficial though, isn't it? It's like, oh, this is her backstory. She's a tragic villain, I guess, because she is a villain. But
like they don't do anything with it. So
no, whereas like with Nick Fury, he does questionable moral things, but he is all about the greater good.
Yeah.
It seems like, whereas this woman seems to be
all for himself.
Actually, she has sinister intentions with what she wants to do. So I don't really know why she's allowed to go and do all of this so unchecked. And the fact that she's the one who announces, "Hey everyone, I know I'm probably going to be in a load of trouble because I unleashed the Sentry upon New York, and people are probably going to be screwed up forever after this, but I'm going to announce the new Avengers, by the way," and everybody clap and cheer. It didn't make any sense to me.
Oh, okay. I like the twist. I like that it sets up an interesting dynamic within the MCU moving forward. They mentioned that Sam is not very happy with this in a jokey way, but it makes sense. This is a PR stunt she was gonna announce Sentry and then trying to get away from everything that could happen to her if she leaves this position of power. She's like, okay, change of plan. I'm gonna use this conference that I'm gonna call for Sentry to introduce these new characters who have just saved New York, as they are my puppets and I am responsible for this operation. So I'm gonna take credit, and in this way I'm gonna try to avoid responsibility for what happened. So, it was a clever little move from her, even though I agree with you, she's not a great villain, she's not very interesting, she's definitely not a new Nick Fury. But I thought it made sense for her to do that, and it made sense for Yelena to kinda like the idea of being part of this team and do something good.
But if they want to sort of show that now they've turned good, you can't have them agree to work with this Fontaine lady, because she's really the main villain of the film. It kind of betrays its own message at the end.
They didn't look that deep into it, man, so don't do that. They're gonna address that.
But it's true.
They're gonna address that. Yeah, they are folding the meta-narrative of MCU fatigue into the MCU itself. I think it's a smart way to gain back our approval. They even have the whole credit sequence be a mockery of these new Avengers, with papers making fun of them and making caricatures. So
yeah, and well, like we said, why can't things just be genuine for once? Why does everything has to be subversion? It's so much subversion that goes on in that. Do you know what I mean? With Suicide Squad, The Boys, it's all subverting the typical hero, and it's very overplayed, I feel like. And it would actually be better if you did. I think if their arc was they all became actually good and they were an actual decent team and they're not just a joke.
I think in a post The Boys world, in a post Invincible world, in a world where we are so used to deconstruction and subversion of, it's very hard to do things genuinely, and there are places to do it. And I think they were trying to do a genuine take on superhero with the Brave New World, but it was just a boring mess. And, moving forward, I think a movie like Fantastic Four, and I know it's not Marvel, it's DC, but Superman, those I think are going to be a very genuine, honest take on superheroism and what it means to be a hero, what it means to be a family. It will be that. This was trying to be something different, and we can have these different flavors of superhero in the MCU that makes the MCU interesting. If they're all just heroes, then it's not as engaging. But the idea of, hey, maybe there's gonna be a little bit of a rift between Sam and Bucky going forward, because he is with these weird new guys that no one likes, and he's trying to form a whatever Avengers team somewhere else, and is having difficulties with that for reasons that I hope they will go into. So I don't know. I don't want to defend this movie too much, because it's definitely not it doesn't deserve me to be oh, it's actually genius. It's not. It's fun. I had fun watching it. I'm looking forward to watch it again, and I'm looking forward to see these characters again. But I agree with you. They are trying so hard to be edgy and cool because they think that's the answer, because The Boys was so successful, and so they feel like they need to address some of this stuff within the MCU itself.
Yeah, they just feel 5 odd years too late for that genre to be at its peak. We've done so much, like you said, we've done so much of it now. It just seems like an odd time to bring out their version of it, and it's lesser than all of those things we mentioned, I feel like.
Yeah. If they have to keep going, though, I think they need to try new things. This movie, I was hoping it to be this. I was hoping it to be a little bit more than this, actually. But
yeah, I was hoping for a bit more.
It's a step in the right direction. It clearly prioritizes characters, that the story is simple, it's easy to follow, and even the post-credit, finally, a post-credit that it's just a simple, straightforward scene that leads directly into the next movie coming out, instead of useless teases with fucking what's his face from One Direction, or the guy from Game of Thrones holding a sword, and fucking Marshall Ali off screen saying something that will never matter. It's just
what was that one?
At the end of Eternals, you got Jon Snow.
Marshall Ali's blade is in the end of Eternals.
You wish. At the end of the Eternals, there is this scene. I do not remember the Eternals at all, but Jon Snow plays Gemma Chan's boyfriend. So like this, one of the Eternals has this human boyfriend, and he helps them out in a certain situation that I do not remember. But he basically is hinted at he will become a hero too. And I do not know this hero from the comics, but at some point he finds this ebony blade, it's called. And in the post-credit scene of the Eternals, one of the post-credit scenes of the Eternals, he goes into this room and the blade is calling to him, I guess. And he goes to it and he looks at it and he holds it in his hands. And then you just hear off screen Marshall Ali's voice being like, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Oh
and that is a hint that Blade is coming into the MCU, but this happened like 5 years ago, and the movie that they were gonna make is not gonna happen anymore. So that's just a dead end. And Eternals has two dead ends, because you have this, and then you have the one where they are on the ship and Henry Styles arrives on the ship with like a, I don't even know how to call it. Is it like it's like a weird goblin guy played by Patton Oswalt, and they're like, oh, come with us, we're gonna do stuff with you. And of course they're never gonna do that because Eternals was a bomb.
God, yeah, I've still never watched it to this day. I don't think I ever will.
Well, you shouldn't, because it's a waste of time. I mean,
yeah, you're right. You're right. This is probably it was a fine post-credit scene. It's
Fantastic Four, and I've read an interesting theory somewhere where someone was saying like, what if it's not the Fantastic Four? Like, that's the Fantastic Four ship, yes, but what if Doom is on the ship? Like, so there's like, theorizing going on, and people are excited. I feel like this is because the MCU used to do this so well. Like the first phase, sure, every movie was just leading up straight into the next one.
People would hang around in the cinema till the end of the credits. The majority of people now, I can't remember now people don't. Yeah, people don't stay.
So
anymore.
Many people were just standing up and leaving. Like, I'm not saying this was good, but like, for example, in Captain America 1, the first Avenger, the post-credit scene is literally just a teaser trailer for the Avengers. I'm not saying do that, but like, you get people excited for the next movie. Don't show me fucking Charlize Theron and Doctor Strange with a weird eye on his forehead going into a rift in space.
Yeah,
and
terrible.
I don't care, and I will never care until you show that in a movie. Like, that I'm watching a movie and you're telling me a story. This actually makes sense to show, because it's the next movie, and maybe they're definitely not gonna be in the movie, but at least we know that there's some connection there, and that they are going to meet with this character at some point in the next 2 to 3 years. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, he probably, again, is a low bar, but probably the best post-credit scene they've had in a long time.
Of course.
And yeah, like you said, I don't know why some of those other ones didn't just, we have the next movie in the slate, let's just set up a teaser of that. It's so simple, and it's what they used to do so well. Yeah, just going back onto, because yeah, like I said, I thought Lewis Pullman as Bob / Sentry Void was the best bit of the movie. Very interesting character, great performance. But when they tell you his origin, for me, it was very disappointing.
Okay, it was just experimented on.
Well, he was experimented on, which is fine. But when the secretary and the silver-haired lady talk about all the failed experiments and what happened, and they're just like, well, how bad can it go? It's just the super soldier serum. So they're suggesting that Sentry and Void was made with the same serum that Red Guardian, Captain America, all these guys were created. But somehow this guy's turned into fucking Superman and has paranormal-like abilities too.
Yeah.
I thought that was lazy. You could have done so many things. There's so many technologies and like science things that have happened.
Or it could have been like a cosmic thing, like they tried
to put
a
cosmic thing. Or I was thinking like, a quantum thing like Ghost. You could have, they're doing some quantum experiments and he gets sucked in and he dies and then he comes back. I felt like if you're going to have a character of that power, stronger than all the Avengers rolled into one, and it's like, well, from what we see, that kind of looks potentially true. And I don't think you can just have this woman making him with a super soldier serum in a lab. I think that's silly.
Yeah, no, I this is not a defense of the movie because definitely they should have addressed it here, but I do feel like that was my first thought too. Like, how did this entity of the void come to be? Like, how does that work? And my first idea was, it's a cosmic being maybe that found refuge inside of Bob while it was being experimented on. So since Bob as a character was so successful and everyone likes him, everyone who watched the film agrees that Lewis Pullman was probably the best part of it. So I'm sure they will give him the spotlight moving forward, and maybe they are holding on to the details of his backstory for a future movie. That's not, again, it's not a defense of this film that they didn't go into that now, because we always say, oh, they're going to explain this in a future movie, and they never do, or they rarely do.
Just like the off-screen Mashallah Ali voice, eh?
Exactly. But I do feel like this is not going to be the origin of Void in the future. Like, we're going to learn more about that experiment. I hope so, because it's an interesting thing, and it makes no sense that it's just a serum.
I disagree. I think we've discovered his origin. If it's changed in later stories, that's because somebody...
It's a retcon.
That's because somebody's created a new story for it. They literally... It's such a throwaway line, oh, how bad can it go? Or what could be done to him? Because it's just the super soldier serum. That was silly for me. And up until that point, I was so invested in finding out who he was and how he came to be. And then that kind of happens when he's sitting down. He's been taken under Silver Hair Lady's wing, and she then coaxes him onto her side so quickly as well. He decides to go along with her plan.
Everything moves at such a quick pace. Like, after they get out of the base, I think a couple of days pass in the movie. That was my main issue with the film, because even the relationship between these characters doesn't really feel as genuine when they go up Avengers Tower and they fight Sentry. I didn't believe these characters to join up and become a team, because, they were bickering until very recently. They got captured by Bucky. So I felt like maybe if they they found a way for the story to happen over a longer period of time, where Bob is kind of like taken under Valentina's wing, and she becomes this confidant to him, and we establish a relationship there that then is broken when he at the end realizes, wait, I don't have to listen to you. I mean, that was an interesting dynamic that was barely explored. Again, very disappointing when you have potential with these characters and you do the bare minimum. So I agree.
I think when you're introducing a character as powerful as that, the origin's important. All the biggest good characters in the MCU have had pretty good in-depth origin stories before then. And you can, you don't have to do a whole film on it. It just could have been done in a more interesting way.
And that's the whole movie, by the way. Like, you just described the whole thing. It's good, but it could have been done in a more interesting way. So,
like you're saying about them all, you're not believing about them becoming a team, but do you not remember when they all went into the void together and they somehow all find each other in Lewis Pullman's bedroom? How does that
Well, I mean,
work?
that's the connection that they share. It's so strong, man. Didn't you
stupid.
get it? Didn't you feel it?
and then John Walker says, well, how do we get out of there? And it's like, well, how the fuck did you get in there? You all managed to find your way there pretty easily.
Dude, you're thinking about this too much. Just enjoy the Family Guy reference where the chicken is trying to kill them for a second. The guy dressed as a chicken.
Is that what that was?
The first thing I thought about was Family Guy, but maybe it's just how my brain works.
I thought that was bizarre. Yeah, I didn't even clock.
They mention it in the beginning of the movie, talking about the lowest moments or something like that. And Lewis Pullman's character is like, when I was high as fuck on, I guess, ketamine or heroin. I don't know what kind of drugs he was using when he was depressed. But he was working as a sign flipping guy. I don't know the expression for it. But he was dressed as a chicken and flipping signs in front of a store. And then we briefly see that at the end when they're going through his memories and they fight this guy dressed as a chicken for a second, and I thought that was a Family Guy reference, but maybe again that's just how my brain works.
Just bizarre. I like we said, low rushing all those climactic moments, and another sort of big rallying speech where Yelena, and they do it, and they've done this in so many other movies as well. In Guardians, it's done so much better. In Guardians 1, Peter Quill has the "We're all losers" speech to rally the troops. She does it, and she's genuinely like horrible, and she does it. She's like, Walker, your family thinks you're trash. Like
And you
we're all,
are.
and we're all losers, but we're a family. It's like, what is this?
It felt like, have you ever seen Community?
I have, but I doubt I'm going to be able to remember this. But
Well, there's like one of the very first episodes. The dean
yeah, I remember him.
is giving this speech on comms, and like it's like first day of registration. Is going over like, oh, maybe you have lost all hope in life, and maybe you are a loser, and maybe like you are trying to find a new calling, and like it's going all over all these like horrible scenarios, and of course they are all linked to the main characters in Community. One of these statements kind of like applies to one or more of these characters, as they are walking into the community college, and then he's going through his notes that he had, but he lost a bunch of pages, I guess, so like he just goes straight to the end. It's like, however, I wish you luck. It's like you just said we are horrible. You didn't say any uplifting stuff, and you're just, this is done, this is finished. So yeah,
yeah, that's exactly what this was, but meant in a genuine way.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I felt it worked for the most part, and when you're comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, it's like comparing Cocomelon.
Well, they shouldn't rip scenes straight from it then, because then I wouldn't think of better movies.
Yeah. Do like me and think about Family Guy while you watch this. You know, like it's a much
like,
better experience.
Thunderbolts is better than the chicken fight scene from Family Guy. Yeah, that's good.
You know, you live a better life when you do stuff like this. Anyway, I think we've talked about this movie long enough. I don't know if you have any other things that you wanted to say. I have one, and it's poor Olga Kurylenko.
Good. Well, I'm glad you mentioned this, because
the actor who plays Taskmaster.
Whatever. Like, why bother even bringing that character back?
She was a Bond girl. Do you remember this? Olga Kurylenko was a Bond girl in Quantum of Solace.
Yes.
And now she's a nothing character in the MCU, in a thankless cameo in another one. So I hope they paid her well.
She's a tiny woman as well, so I don't know, but she's bulked up or she's on stilts. But...
And I watched I watched an interview, I think, with one of the writers there were like 1,000 writers for this, but like one of the writers who worked on Thunderbolts, and he was saying something like, oh, Taskmaster wasn't even supposed to be killed at first, and he was saying, oh, maybe it was the director, but like, anyway, he was saying, we decided to do this so that the audience would think, oh wow, anything can happen now, you know, no one is safe in this movie because they killed Taskmaster. I'm like, no. I didn't get that feeling. I actually thought, okay, so this is gonna be the only character who dies for the entire movie.
If they get rid of Taskmaster, who's safe? That is so funny, honestly. And it's a really missed opportunity because, and it's a great comparison with Suicide Squad 1 and 2, right?
Oh my god, especially the second one. The beginning of the second one, that's when you really think, oh my god.
Exactly, and they play that for laughs as well. But so Suicide Squad 1, we have that character who makes knots, and he like dies like instantly. Do you remember him? He gets his head blown off by
Slipknot, the guy who can climb anything.
Yeah, that dude. And then none of the main crew die for the rest of the film against the big bad, other than the Diablo guy.
And he didn't even get an intro sequence or like a title card when he's introduced.
Exactly.
So like, you know that he's going to die immediately, and he does.
Exactly.
And it's so funny.
Whereas Suicide Squad, and not counting the sort of fake out beginning they do where they kill loads of the characters, our main core group of characters, they stay together until they fight Starro, and that's where Polka Dot Man sort of sacrifices themselves.
What?
The Polka Dot Man gets killed, doesn't he? And it increases the stakes of that main big battle at the end, and it increases the threat of the villain. It would have been so much better if Bob or Sentry killed Taskmaster. It increases the stakes.
Yeah, you keep Taskmaster up until later, and then maybe Bob, without even realizing how strong he can be, he accidentally kills her or something.
You could have done. You know the moment when they go and they have the first battle with Sentry and they run away?
Yeah.
And because we see Bob have a dark turn at this point, what would have been even more interesting if having Taskmaster in the rest of the movie would make it less interesting. But you have her in that scene and Bob loses control for the first time and he's fighting them off, but he accidentally kills one of the crew. and that's his turn into becoming bad, and also increases the stakes as well. I just think that would have been a much better way to do it.
Agreed. Yeah, and there's a few things that I've heard, like Sentry wasn't even always going to be in the movie. At some point, Wyatt Russell's character was supposed to be the main villain, so I'm glad they changed that. And I was curious about Zemo, Daniel Bruhl's character from Winter Soldier, and
would have been a much more interesting inclusion. Again, a person with no superhero abilities, which would have been disappointing, but a better character for sure.
Yeah, he would have been interesting to add to the mixture here. Maybe, like he tries to do something from prison and then they have to break him out, or he breaks out of prison and then happens upon them because they have to capture him, and he convinces them, oh, actually, I am doing this to stop Valentina from doing something bad, so you need to help me. And so they have to band together and they realize that they are all expendables and they need to do something to stop this woman. I don't know, I feel like there was a story there they could have told where Zemo was in an interesting part of.
Yeah, definitely would have made it better, I think.
And one last thing that I wanted to mention, because of course the movie is called, it was called Thunderbolts. And Thunderbolts is a reference, especially when you go to the source material in the comics, to Thunderbolt Ross, who's the character that we've seen all throughout the MCU since the first Hulk movie. Betty Ross' father, he was a military official. He became a senator, maybe. Yeah, it was a senator.
Yeah.
And he was played by the great William Hurt. William Hurt passed away. They replaced him with Harrison Ford in Brave New World. And he had a huge role. He was like the second lead of the movie with Sam Wilson. So when you hear that there's a movie coming out called The Thunderbolts, you're like, oh, how are they connected to the president of the fucking United States? And they're not. And they don't even mention the similarity or the connection there. They just make a joke about this little league football team that Yelena was a part of when she was a kid. And I like how they fold that into the narrative, and the fact that she was always trying to lead her peers, and that they were the worst team ever, but she wanted them to believe in themselves, so she was always helping out people. And that kind of like reflects how she is the leader, I guess, of this new team.
Leader of a bunch of losers.
Like the ones that she played with when she was a kid. But it's so weird. It's clearly a retcon. Well, not a retcon, but something that they decided to change while they were already producing, in production of the movie. They changed direction. They decided to do something else because it makes no sense to call them the Thunderbolts for this specific reason.
Yeah, maybe if William Hurt was still playing Thunderbolt Ross, he might have had more of a role in the film. Because I think as soon as Harrison Ford took on that character, it probably was a one and done type scenario.
I'm sure, yeah. He was like, okay, I'm going to do one movie, you're going to pay me $40 million, and then I'm going to bounce off.
Yeah, and like we've said before, I think when we were talking about the casting announcements, it's another wasted opportunity. Now Red Hulk is Harrison Ford, and when the fuck is he going to ever be in another MCU project as Red Hulk again? It's
it could just be a voice role for him. Bradley
Cooper
Cooper always voices the raccoon.
Because you were mentioning the name as well, I thought I had one last point. The constant mention throughout the film that the Avengers are gone, there's no more heroes. I just found that quite funny. I mean, obviously Iron Man and Captain America have gone, but there's like hundreds of superheroes out there. Is the Hulk's just fucked off. Doctor Strange is just fucked off. These people don't care anymore. I can understand maybe why the silver-haired lady is saying it, because she's trying to do it for her own benefit.
Yeah, of course.
But then it's echoed as a sentiment throughout the rest of the movie. Like Bucky kind of feels it. The secretary lady says it a few times. It's just like, what? There's fucking loads of heroes all over the place. Are the Avengers really gone? I don't know.
But they are not one team. There's a bunch of heroes that still have to unite.
When was the last time in the MCU universe the heroes were together as an organized group? I think it's not since like Avengers Age of Ultron that's been a thing.
Yeah, true.
So that was a bit silly. But that's why this film is alright. I think if I'm grading it, it's a 6 out of 10 for me. Purely for some of those good moments raised it up, and there was nothing like egregiously bad, really. I found some bits of it cringe. Some very uninteresting plot lines, but like you said, it's definitely better and more appropriate in what it's doing than most of the other projects they've done.
And do you think that because I had this question for a friend of mine when I went to see the movie in theaters, I was like, would your opinion of this movie change if it wasn't placed here? Like if it wasn't released now, but let's say 6 years ago?
Yeah, this feels like that era of films that was kind of just before Infinity War and in between like Age of Ultron and Civil War. You had your Ant-Man 2s and your...
Oh, this is so much better than Ant-Man 2 though. Like I feel like...
I wouldn't say so much better. I think this kind of sits in that realm of just like plain safe.
Yeah, it is plain, it is safe. It is not as safe as other stuff that they've released recently. And I feel like we've become so jaded in our judgment of the MCU because they proved that they didn't really have a roadmap or a plan for the post-Endgame. And they were just like trying to see what sticks to the wall by throwing a bunch of stuff at it. And if this movie came out like a year after Endgame, I think maybe it could have been received so much better. Like people would have liked it a lot more, but so many people have lost interest in the MCU as a whole, and so they're not even gonna watch this movie, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. Yeah, I think if it came out in a time when the MCU was more revered and had more of a following, it would be way better received.
Like people, myself included, were really drinking the Kool-Aid. You know, like after Endgame, we were still, for a couple of years there, people were still very excited about new MCU projects. You know, I remember going to see Doctor Strange and people were fucking losing their minds at all the cameos and references and oh my god, the Fantastic Four are coming and oh, these are the fucking Inhumans guys. You know, people knew stuff and they were responding very strongly to the movies, even the lesser ones. Doctor Strange 2 is not a great film, but had a few good moments.
I think by that point, the real excitement had dropped off, though. I don't think Doctor Strange 2 did insanely well. I think after, like, Spider-Man 2 came out after. That was the first one after Endgame, wasn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just...
I think you're right, though. I was still personally excited to see where it was going to go, and it slowly chipped away at me. And now, as it's become evident, they don't really know what's going on, and now finally there is a little bit more of direction back here. We've got an actual tease for the next movie. We know Fantastic Four will lead right into Avengers Doomsday 2, so they've got these 3 films to kind of try and get themselves back on track a bit here. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, in terms of the cinema experience of watching the film, you know, like big Marvel movies usually have big crowds with loud reactions to stuff, and Doctor Strange 2 was still that for me. I went in a packed theater and people were really responsive and like gasping at appropriate moments and screaming at the screen and laughing. Thunderbolts, I think, is a superior movie to Doctor Strange 2.
Oh my god, yeah.
And the theater was fairly full, but I didn't hear that much, oh my god, it's Bucky. You know, people were not losing their minds in the theater at all. Like, not even in the more surprising moments. I guess there weren't that many surprises, but people were not cheering, oh, it's Bucky, yes, it's back. Yeah, like the excitement that used to be there during the cinema experience of watching a Marvel movie is not there. And I think we will not see that until Doomsday. And if we don't see that in Doomsday, then they're doomed, I guess. So
no, for sure.
All right,
what would you give it then out of 10?
I would give it a solid 7.
Yeah, decent.
Yeah, and that was our Thunderbolts review. Let's move on.
So adorable.